There's a place in California where someone tried to build paradise and watched it collapse in 4 years. The stone walls still stand. Arched doorways frame empty sky, but the people who believed in it are gone. If you don't know exactly where to look, you'll drive straight past it, never realizing that more than 1,000 people once stood there convinced they were building the future. California hides ghost towns the way other states hide scandals. They're scattered across deserts where summer heat climbs past 120 degrees. Buried in mountain passes where snow can trap you for days. Sinking into valleys that maps quietly stopped labeling decades ago. Some vanished when the gold ran out. Some when the water did. One was erased in a single night by a flood, and one sits at the center of an environmental collapse so massive that people still argue whether it was allowed to happen. These aren't reenactment towns with gift shops. These are places that died and stayed dead, and the first wasn't built by miners. It was built by a man who believed he could redesign society. Llano del Rio, the utopia that failed. In 1914, socialist lawyer Job Harriman lost the Los Angeles mayoral race after a bombing scandal derailed his campaign. Instead of retreating, he went into the desert. 70 miles north of Los Angeles, in the exposed flatlands of Antelope Valley, Harriman founded Llano del Rio, a cooperative colony built on shared ownership. Land, labor, profit, responsibility, no rich, no poor, no hierarchy. Within 2 years, more than 1,000 people lived there. They built a hotel, a print shop, a cannery, a school. They published their own newspaper. Alfalfa fields stretched across irrigated soil where there had once been only dust. For a moment, it worked. Production increased. Children studied while parents worked assigned roles. Visitors described the colony as disciplined and hopeful. It looked like proof that utopia could be engineered. But the desert doesn't care about ideology. Water rights disputes surfaced almost immediately. The wells couldn't sustain the population. Leadership disagreements fractured the community from within. Scarcity doesn't just test systems, it exposes them. By 1918, only 4 years after it began, Llano del Rio collapsed. Families packed up and moved to Louisiana to try again. The dream didn't survive the climate. Today, the site sits on private land near 2 quiet highways. No sign marks it, no fence advertises it. If you push through brush and sun-baked earth, you'll find the stone assembly hall still standing. Its arches frame nothing now. Rusted pipes jut from sand where gardens once grew. It remains one of the only socialist utopian colonies in American history that left behind physical ruins. A failed philosophy preserved in stone. And it wouldn't be the last time California tried to build something in a place that couldn't sustain it. Panamint City, the canyon, took it back. High in the Panamint Mountains above Death Valley, wedged into a narrow canyon, sit the remains of one of the wildest mining towns in California history. Reaching it today requires a punishing climb up Surprise Canyon, a rocky route most vehicles won't survive. In 1873, 3 fugitives hiding from the law discovered silver there. Within months, Panamint City exploded to life. More than 2,000 people crowded into a canyon so narrow buildings stacked vertically against stone walls. The main street was barely wide enough for pack mules. Outlaws arrived, gamblers arrived, gunfighters followed. The town became so lawless that Wells Fargo refused to operate there. Robberies were constant. Mine owners responded by casting their silver into 400-pound cannonballs, too heavy for bandits to carry. For 2 chaotic years, Panamint roared. Gunfire echoed off canyon walls. Money moved in staggering amounts. Saloons stayed open until dawn. Then, in 1876, the canyon answered. A flash flood tore through Surprise Canyon at night, ripping buildings from foundations and dragging them downstream in darkness. By morning, most of the town was gone. The silver veins were thinning anyway. By 1877, Panamint City was empty. Today, hikers who make the difficult climb find stone foundations clinging to hillsides, a towering brick smokestack rising against the canyon, and mine shafts descending into shadow. The isolation preserved something most ghost towns lost: real silence, wind moving through a canyon that once shook with ambition and violence. And not all California ghost towns sit in deserts or mountains. One of them is surrounded by water. You can see it from a train window, but you can't step inside. Drawbridge, the town that's still sinking. In the middle of San Francisco Bay, hidden inside protected marshland, stands a town you are not allowed to enter. Its name is Drawbridge. It began in the 1870s as a hunting retreat for wealthy San Franciscans. Ducks filled the wetlands. Trains delivered visitors who came to shoot, drink, and escape the city. But some people stayed. Railroad workers, fishermen, families. Homes were built on wooden pilings between tidal sloughs. Small hotels rose from marsh grass. By the early 1900s, Drawbridge had become a quiet but permanent settlement. It was never large, but it was alive. Then the ecosystem shifted. Wetlands were diked and drained for salt production. Industry polluted the bay. Wildlife declined. Rail service slowed. Drawbridge didn't collapse in spectacle. It thinned. The last resident left in 1979. And here's what makes it different. It still exists, but it's sealed off. The town now sits inside the Don Edwards San Francisco Bay National Wildlife Refuge. Landing there is illegal. Entering buildings is illegal. Even approaching too closely can bring fines. From above, the houses lean into the mud. Foundations dissolve slowly. Roofs sag inward. Windows stare out across reeds and gray water. Decay is happening in real time. If you ride the Amtrak line between San Jose and Oakland, the train passes directly beside it. Passengers glance out and see collapsing structures. Most assume it's debris. They have no idea they're looking at a town. Drawbridge wasn't destroyed by fire or violence. It was absorbed. There's something unsettling about a place you can see, but are forbidden to enter. It feels less abandoned, more quarantined. Cerro Gordo, the mountain that funded a city. High above Owens Valley, at nearly 8,500 feet, sits a ghost town that did more than make miners wealthy. It helped build Los Angeles. Cerro Gordo was founded in the 1860s after enormous deposits of silver and lead were discovered in the Inyo Mountains. At the time, Los Angeles was little more than a frontier pueblo, or from Cerro Gordo changed that. Mule teams hauled bullion down treacherous mountain trails to Owens Lake, where steamships carried it south. Profits funded infrastructure, commerce, expansion. The city that would later dominate the West Coast was, in part, financed by metal ripped from this mountain. At its peak, more than 1,000 people lived there. Homes clung to steep slopes. Winters were brutal. Supplies arrived slowly. Isolation was constant. Silver made it worth enduring. Then the deposits thinned. The town didn't explode, it faded. Brief zinc revivals kept it breathing. Caretakers prevented collapse. Fire reshaped parts of the settlement. For decades, Cerro Gordo existed in limbo, too important to forget, too remote to thrive. Then in 2018, investors bought the entire town. Every structure, every acre. Their goal wasn't demolition, it was restoration. They rebuilt cabins, documented artifacts, opened the town to overnight visitors. Today, You can sleep in original miner cabins and walk wooden streets unchanged for more than a century. Cerro Gordo isn't purely a ghost town anymore, it's something else. Part preservation, part performance. Which raises an uncomfortable question. When does saving history begin to reshape it? And when does restoration become reenactment? Ballarat, the town that stayed. On the western edge of Death Valley, under relentless sun and wind, sits a town that should be gone. But isn't. Ballarat was founded in 1897 as a supply hub for miners working the Panamint Mountains. It had a school, a post office, saloons, a Wells Fargo office. Hundreds passed through. When the mines failed, Ballarat had no reason to exist. By the 1920s, nearly everyone had left. But not everyone. For decades, at least one caretaker has lived there, watching, maintaining, refusing to let it fully disappear. A small general store operated until recently. Visitors could buy a cold drink inside a structure older than most towns in the region. The jail still stands. Adobe walls slump slowly into dust. Above the town, the cemetery rests under open sky, wooden markers splintering, names fading into sun-bleached grain. Ballarat earned a reputation over time. Drifters hid there, criminals passed through. People looking to disappear found it useful. That edge never fully vanished. Ballarat doesn't feel curated, it doesn't feel resurrected, it feels inhabited by choice. Ballarat persists, quietly, stubbornly, under a sky so wide it makes human ambition look temporary. And the next town doesn't persist, it doesn't erode, it stops, exactly where it was. Because some places don't collapse, they stop. Bodie, preserved in arrested decay, high in the eastern Sierra, above 8,000 feet, where wind moves uninterrupted across sagebrush and winter berries everything in white, stands a town that doesn't feel abandoned. It feels paused. Its name is Bodie. Gold was discovered there in 1859. The real boom came in the 1870s. Within a decade, nearly 10,000 people lived in Bodie. 65 saloons lined its streets. Gambling halls ran through the night. Gunfire was common enough that children reportedly stopped reacting to it. The phrase, "bad man from Bodie," became shorthand for violence across the region. This wasn't a romantic frontier town. It was unstable, profitable, and dangerous. Then the gold thinned. Fires tore through wooden blocks. Investors pulled out. Families drifted away. By the early 1900s, decline was clear. By the 1940s, the last residents had gone. And then something unusual happened. No one replaced them. The state eventually designated Bodie preserved in what officials call arrested decay. They don't restore it, they stabilize it. They prevent collapse, but they don't rewind time. Walk into a house today and you'll see dishes still stacked on tables, curtains hanging in dusty windows, bottles behind bar counters, children's toys resting on warped floors. Even the mortuary still holds the coffins. It feels less like ruins and more like interruption, like everyone stepped outside and never returned. Visitors who remove anything from Bodie, even a nail, are said to be cursed. Each year, small packages arrive at the park office. Inside are stolen artifacts returned anonymously. Letters describe car accidents, job losses, illness, sudden streaks of bad luck. Whether coincidence or guilt, the belief persists. Rangers don't promote the curse. They also don't dismiss it, because fear preserves what fences cannot. Bodie doesn't feel haunted. It feels unfinished, as if time paused mid-sentence and never resumed. Calico, history rebuilt. In the Mojave Desert, under hills streaked in red and rust, stands a town that looks authentic from a distance. Up close, it's more complicated. Calico was founded in 1881 after a massive silver strike. Within 5 years, more than 500 mines operated nearby. 1,200 residents filled the streets. Saloons and boarding houses ran without pause. Then, silver prices collapsed in the 1890s. Calico emptied almost overnight. The desert began reclaiming it, wood splintering, roofs caving, mine entrances eroding into dust. For decades, it was a genuine ruin. Then, in the 1950s, it was purchased. Buildings were rebuilt, facades reconstructed, additions made that never originally existed. Eventually, the town reopened as a county park. Today, visitors walk wooden sidewalks. Children ride a narrow-gauge train. Staged gunfights echo down a curated main street. From one angle, Calico is preservation. From another, its interpretation. Step beyond the reconstructed storefronts and you'll find original mine shafts still honeycombing the hills. Rusting equipment lies scattered off-trail. Stone foundations sit beyond the tourist loop, untouched. There are 2 Calicos, one for visitors, one for the desert. Darwin, the town that refused to leave. At the end of a narrow road between Death Valley and the Sierra Nevada sits a town that technically still exists, but barely. Its name is Darwin. Founded in 1874 after silver was discovered in the nearby Argus Range, Darwin boomed quickly. More than 1,000 people once passed through its streets. Then the ore thinned. Like so many others, it faded. But Darwin didn't empty completely. It shifted. By the 1970s, artists, drifters, and people stepping away from conventional life began occupying abandoned buildings. They didn't rebuild them. They stayed as they were. Today, roughly 20 residents remain. There is no gas station, no store, no services, just scattered homes among collapsing structures and rusted mining equipment. Visitors are tolerated, not welcomed. Hand-painted signs warn against trespassing. Some buildings are lived in. Others are unstable shells. It's not always clear which is which, and that uncertainty changes the atmosphere. Walking through Darwin doesn't feel like visiting a ghost town. It feels like crossing into a place that chose isolation. No tour guides, no plaques, no preservation committees, just wind, and the sense that someone is watching from behind dusty windows. Darwin isn't a relic, it's a decision. In a state built on reinvention and forward motion, Darwin chose something else. Not collapse, not restoration, invisibility. California sells reinvention as identity. Sunshine, opportunity, a second chance. But scattered across its deserts, mountains, and valleys are the remains of what happens when reinvention fails. Utopias that couldn't secure water. Boomtowns that outran their own resources. Communities preserved as theater. Places that chose not to be seen. Some were erased, some were rebuilt, some are still decaying. Skidoo, justice without appeal. High in the Panamint Mountains above Death Valley lie the remains of Skidoo. Founded in 1906 after gold was discovered nearly 6,000 feet up, the town had one immediate problem. There was no water. So, miners built a 23-mile pipeline across brutal terrain just to survive. 700 residents moved in. A bank opened. A newspaper printed headlines. Ore flowed steadily down the mountain. It looked stable. Then, in 1908, a saloon dispute turned deadly. A popular bartender was shot and killed. The town didn't wait for a trial. A mob dragged the accused man from jail and hanged him from a telephone pole. Accounts say when a photographer arrived too late, townspeople cut the body down and hanged him again. Up there, isolation replaced oversight. Justice came without appeal. By 1917, the gold thinned. The pipeline was dismantled. the town emptied. Today, only foundations remain. Wind moves across a slope where law once answered only to itself. Harrisburg, the desert that keeps its own. Deep in Death Valley sit the remains of Harrisburg, founded around 1906 by a prospector known as Shorty Harris. Shorty had a habit of discovering fortune and losing it. He found gold here and named the settlement after himself. For a few years, tents and shacks clung to unforgiving rock. Then the ore ran thin. By 1915 it was over. But Death Valley slows decay. Rusted cans still lie where they fell. Glass bottles still catch the sun. Stone walls stand in heat that feels permanent. Shorty died in 1934 and asked to be buried in the desert. He never found lasting wealth, but he never left the landscape either. Some chase fortune, some chase belonging. The desert kept him. Bombay Beach, paradise reversed. On the edge of the Salton Sea sits Bombay Beach, less a ghost town than a warning. The Salton Sea was created by accident in 1905 when irrigation canals flooded a desert basin. For decades, it was sold as paradise. Resorts lined the shoreline. Celebrities visited. Boats cut across desert water. But the lake had no outlet. Runoff poured in, salinity rose. Fish died by the millions. The smell drove tourists away. As the shoreline retreated, it exposed pesticide-laced lakebed. Now, wind lifts toxic dust into nearby communities. Respiratory illness rates have climbed. The water keeps shrinking. Fewer than 300 people remain in Bombay Beach. Abandoned trailers sink into salt. The shoreline crunches with bleached fish bones. And yet artists moved in. Murals stretch across derelict walls. Sculptures rise from exposed seabed. Bombay Beach is collapse and reinvention happening at the same time. A paradise created by accident, destroyed by chemistry, reimagined by those who stayed. California built its identity on reinvention. Come west, start over. But scattered across its deserts, mountains, marshes, and valleys are the remains of what happens when reinvention fails. Some towns were erased, some were rebuilt, some are still dissolving, slowly, publicly, in real time. And one sits in marshland, visible from a passing train, unreachable. If you drive long enough in California, you'll pass near one of them. No sign will mark it, no crowd will gather. But beyond the highway, the walls are still standing, and the silence doesn't feel empty. It feels earned.